Kevin and Robert, who are just superheroes in this campaign, traveling all around and setting this up and the work that you do. Let's give them a round of applause. Encinas family, thank you for hosting us. Like, to invite people in your home once is a big deal. To invite them twice is a bigger deal. To say, just move in, all of you. Mil gracias por tu hospitalidad. You know, when you read the history books, things seem pretty easy, right? You get a book of American history. Turn to page 67. Slavery just ends. It's like a one-page description. Like suddenly one day, Abraham Lincoln comes and it's done. Page 79, women get the right to vote. Page 102, segregation ends. Page 106, Cesar Chavez comes and farm workers begin to have some rights. And one day marriage equality comes. And yet if you're in the midst of struggle, those words get written so slowly. The paragraphs so painstakingly. The pages turn so infrequently. That it's rare those moments when you're actually part of not just marking history, but making history. And the reason that I'm here on this afternoon, away from my family, in a city that I have no power in whatsoever, is because we actually all have a lot of power. To not just get out and vote, but to exercise our democratic rights. To say this democracy is not somebody else's, it's ours. The majority of the American people who believe in women's rights, who believe in immigrant rights, who believe in opportunity, who believe that this shouldn't just be a country for the rich, but that the middle class should be able to save money up, to buy homes, and to have education funds for their children to go to higher education, to college and to universities. My family story, I'm not just a random guy here too, because my roots run pretty deep here. I didn't just come here because the Dodgers have spring training here. I didn't just come here because the Lakers lost to the Suns last night, which is good for both of us because we need a good draft pick, so we want to keep losing. But I'm here because my grandmother, I was sharing with Juanita, the family of my grandmother, who shares her same name, Juanita Iberri, who was born as one of 19 children in Superior, Arizona. And her father, who was an immigrant with her mother from Sonora, from the town of Guaymas, had a small grocery store in that mining town, and had a small grocery store in downtown Phoenix. And I think they kept having kids because they needed people for free to work in the store. But even I think President Hoover came through Arizona once and heard about them and visited them because he had to see this Mexican family that had 19 children with the same two parents, and my great-grandmother was done having children at 37. So do the math. I mean, she was basically pregnant for 2 decades and then done. But they were very humble people who struggled, but who were able to put together the American dream in the face of the Depression, when Americans who were of Mexican descent were transported over the border in the midst because they were looking for scapegoats of the economic times and up in the mines. These are Americans. They weren't just Mexicans who immigrated here to become citizens. Native-born Americans of Mexican descent. Their cousins and nephews and nieces of my family, some of them were sent over the border. And the reason that I say that is if we don't read those pages of history, we forget it. We're doomed to repeat it. And today, we have a candidate who is in this state, who wants to build walls up to divide us, to return to the sort of hate that has never been the core of what America is about and isn't going to be what our future is dictated by. We can't stand by it. In each one of the conversations that you have on the phone or in front of someone's home, you have to let people know this election matters. It's kind of tough because everybody always says this election is the most important. And it often is, it just gets more and more important. But this one, it's not hyperbole, it's not exaggeration. It seems pretty clear that we will have probably a nominee on the Republican side named Donald Trump. And if it's Ted Cruz, it's no better, let's be clear.
Worse.
Maybe even worse, but both of them represent us turning against each other. We've only begun to see that places like Chicago today. Brave Americans who are standing up, but I'm worried about the conflict and the fighting and the open, returning to a place that we haven't seen in this country in decades. I'm worried for women that we have a misogynist who thinks he can say things about women that haven't been acceptable for decades, who would appoint to the Supreme Court, and the next president will probably have 3 or 4 appointees to the Supreme Court. They could roll back decades of progress. And for our immigrant community, who would turn them into the scapegoats for everything that we're still struggling through. It's funny, you know, I was with President Obama with the nation's mayors about a month ago. It was 365 days out from his last day in office. And he said it's funny, you kind of rewind the clock and it's like, the Republicans want to return us to a time in 2008. Was that such a great year? 2008 when, you know, the unemployment was double digits, when Phoenix and Chandler, there was foreclosures, and, you know, when veterans were coming home and living in cars, when we had, you know, 30% of the Latino community and as much as 40% of other communities had no access to health care at all. And there's a lot more we have to do, and things that the president hasn't been able to do because of a Republican Congress that has stood in his way. But think how far we've come in that time. Marriage equality, the number of people, more people than ever, a higher percentage, and more people that have health insurance than ever in our history. Out of a recession, unemployment cut in half, you know, people coming back, even though we have a lot to do. And so as you go door to door or as you talk to people, don't just tell Hillary's story. I'm going to talk about Hillary in a second. But I need you to tell your story. Because it's the one thing you own that nobody else does. The reason I told you my story is I can say I'm supporting Hillary Clinton because I have a lot of respect for her. I like Bernie Sanders. I hope he continues to do good work on the Senate. But dreams aren't just about saying you have dreams. They're actually about delivering on them.
Yes.
And friends aren't about just coming together for the first time and saying, oh, a new friend. We need to trust an old friend who's been by our side every step of the way. Before Obamacare was a result of decades of work that Hillary Clinton did. She was First Lady and stood up. Not to deport children and to reunify families. That's a promise you can take to the bank. That doesn't come from somebody who voted against comprehensive immigration reform. It comes from somebody who has always been there. You want a radical? You want an idealist? How about Hillary Clinton, who went to the Deep South when there was still segregation in schools and did undercover work at great danger to herself to make sure that African American kids could go to schools that they were being denied from, who was able to step up before people were talking about pre-K education and said that we should be investing in our very youngest Americans because if you do that early, the poverty, the criminal justice issues, all the things we pay so much for later in life can be turned around. We're supported by people that we trust, like Dolores Huerta, like Marian Wright Edelman, who started the Children's Defense Fund, the people that we know. And I have to say, Hillary Clinton is probably the most qualified person to ever run for president in the history of the United States.
Yes.
I mean, who else has been Secretary of State, Senator, lived in the White House for 8 years, and not just as a First Lady, but as a leading policy person who took on activism, who took on tough issues. Like, she's going to be day one able to lead this nation, unify it, and be an example to the world. And so I'll close with this. You know, when we're called on to write those sentences that I mentioned of history, we've got to step up, and we've got to convince our fellow Americans to do the same. Arizona, not just for this election, this primary, which we have to deliver for Hillary, but could be a state that actually delivers for the Democrats for the first time since 1996. It's 1996. That's why people are traveling to multiple states. That's why veterans like myself are stepping up. That's why we have Californians here. I've met Arizonans, of course, that are here, Nevadans, Coloradans. I was just with carpenters, hundreds of carpenters that are going door to door, because they know that if you put a Republican in office right now, their rhetoric is all about giving jobs to Americans, but their policies are all about taking them away. And making sure that if you do get a job, they're non-union, so you're going to be, or the minimum wage is so low, you have to take 2 or 3 jobs, which means you're never with your family, which means we have to depend on things like after-school programs instead of a parent assisting in homework. So this election really is about whether we believe in this country and what it can be again, or whether we want to turn against each other. It's as simple as that. When I've campaigned, every single time, you can go through the policy sheets, some people will ask about them, you can get into particular issues, but at the end, it's going to be one American talking to another American. It's the most powerful thing you can do. It's a scary thing for a lot of us. Some of us like to call, don't like to walk. Some of us like to walk, don't like to call. Some of us are kind of shy to do either. You're like, oh, I don't want to impose. I'm not trying to convert you to anything. I'm not trying to sell you anything. But you know that look when Americans open their doors with their already busy lives. But you have to say, look, I'm not getting paid 1 penny. I'm here on a hot day. I'm here on an afternoon I can be with my family because this matters so much to me. This is my story. What do you think? Do you think you can stand by the sidelines, or can we count on you to get out there and to vote, and to bring 5 neighbors or family members with you, and to continue doing that, not just in this primary, but also when it comes to the general election? We cannot let a man of hate take over this country. But we're not just playing defense. We have somebody who, even if we had the best candidate on the other side, would still be head and shoulders above him or her. We've got Hillary Clinton. She's going to be our next president with your help. And one day, you'll read that chapter, and you'll say to your children and your children's children, I was there. That was me. Thank you all so much.